Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and today we're making a super fun rainbow cake. And to be honest, in my whole career of making cakes, I've never made a rainbow cake. I'm starting off today's video with my cakes fully crumb coated already. If you want to see a video where I'm crumb coating a cake, you can go ahead and check out that video in the right hand corner. Then I'm putting down some cornstarch and I'm rolling this fondant nice and thin. Now I don't want to go too thin because I don't want anything kind of bubbling or peeking out. So I'm going just a slight bit thicker this time around. You're going to notice that when I lay this fondant down, I do end up with a slight line at the top, but that's going to be totally fine because I'm covering this with a lot of detail. Whenever I'm making more simple cakes that I know I can't use any detail to cover things up with, if I ended up with a line like this, I probably would just do it again. Or I would spend a lot more time smoothing everything out. For my cakes, I did use an Italian meringue buttercream, which I like to work with because it smooths a lot better in my opinion than American buttercream. However, if you're using American buttercream and your cakes have been in the fridge for a little while, you will need to put a little bit of shortening on it just so that your fondant can adhere to it. With the Italian meringue buttercream, it's a little bit softer, so I don't need to add any extra shortening or anything to it for the fondant to stick. If you're just starting out covering your cakes with fondant, then it's a really good idea to start with a smaller cake. This 6-inch here is what I used to practice on a lot before I started making a lot of cakes. It's just a bit easier for you to control and really learn how to work with the fondant. I didn't want to waste any more cake boards, so that's why I'm actually using a plate of mine to do this cake on. But honestly, if you are making cakes and you're really not that advanced yet, I would just use a cake board. It's going to be a lot harder to cut off the edges using a plate like this. In order to create a little bit more of a sharp edge, you'll notice that I put my finger there and I used the smoother to create that edge, and then I smooth it out on the top. This next technique I'm going to show you, I only started doing within the last couple of years. I want my cake to sit a little bit more down and I don't want it to be so floppy on the top. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a little space for my cake to sit in. So you take a cake board that's the exact same size of the cake that you're going to be putting on top, and you just kind of take your X-Acto knife to cut out that piece of fondant. Lift that piece of fondant out, and then you're going to have a little bit of an indent for your cake to sit in. If you want your cake to be super stable, then you're going to need 2 different dowels. You're going to need this large one, which is going to go through both of the tiers of the cake, and then you're going to need this shorter one. The reason that I use that shorter one is because it has a point, and when I stab it into the cake board, then it is able to stay. I almost forgot to put these bubble tea straws in, and it's really important that you make sure all of these bubble tea straws are the exact same height, or else your cake is going to tip a little bit. These bubble tea straws really help for the cake to actually sit on the board instead of on the other layer of cake. One word of advice is that I actually like to make sure I stack the cakes when the fondant on the top tier is still relatively malleable. I find that when you do it when the fondant is completely dry, you can end up with cracking if you don't do it well enough. I'm using edible food gel on all of my fondant here to color it the colors of the rainbow. Everything that I'm using today, I'm going to put in the description box below. It's really important that once you've mixed the colors, you cover it with saran wrap so it doesn't dry out. If you find that once you open up the colors back up and they're still a little bit sticky or they're still a little dry, then you can go ahead and add a little bit of shortening or cornstarch. I'm going to start off by making my rainbow, and all I'm doing is I'm making kind of a snake, and then I'm going to place it around my cookie cutter. I'm starting with the color violet because that is going to be the bottom color of the rainbow. Continue on with all the rest of the colors and make sure that you put a little dab of water in between each color layer so that it adheres nicely. Now you can let this rainbow dry completely, and if you insert some sticks into the bottom of the rainbow, then you're able to just pierce the rainbow through the top of your cake and it can be freestanding. I'm not going to be doing that today because I don't have the time to let this dry, so I'm just going to directly place this rainbow right on the cake. You'll notice how I kind of kept that cookie cutter in place so that the bottom part of the rainbow didn't get all messed up. The best way to adhere things to your cake is to steam it first and then put all of your parts on. Now, if you're working just with smaller things, then you can go ahead and do it with a little bit of water instead, but I will say that steaming it all together is a much better way to do it. These little clouds here are made super easily by just taking some white fondant and then rolling it into little balls. I've also seen it where you can roll all of these balls together to form your cloud and then cover it again with fondant, but I really kind of like this piecey look. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little fondant ribbon around the center of the cake. So I'm taking my pastry cutter and then I'm just adhering this small little ribbon all the way around. I often take a smoother to kind of press things into my cake, so then that way I don't get my fingerprints in the fondant. I want to place some stars at the top of my cake, so all I'm doing is I'm taking this fondant that I dyed yellow, rolling it out nice and thin, and then using a cookie cutter to cut out all of these shapes. Now it's time to make that little striped kind of design in the middle of this cake. Notice here how I'm using my pastry cutter to kind of outline where I'm going to put all of these things. This helps make sure that my lines stay nice and straight. I want my border to kind of have an arch in it, so what I'm doing is I'm aligning all of those fondant pieces and then cutting out an arch with a cookie cutter. This is why it's really important to kind of indent your cake first with that pastry cutter so you know exactly where things are going, because in place of that yellow color, I'm actually going to be placing dangling golden pearls. Whenever you steam your cake, it's a lot easier to adhere these pearls onto your cake directly. Normally what I used to do is I would take the pearl and just kind of indent, and then it would be sitting in the cake that way, but this would lend to these popping out really easily. The other way that I would try to do this is I would take the end of a paintbrush, dip it into a little bit of edible adhesive, and then I would poke the cake and then put the pearl on. But this added on a significant amount of time. So steaming is the way to go if you want to put your pearls on really nice and quick. My husband did help me chop off a significant amount of that pole that is going right through the cake, but there's still a little bit of it showing. But no fear, we're going to cover that up with a beautiful bow. So you just take a little strip and then you kind of make that little triangle piece at the bottom. Notice how I'm kind of crinkling these edges up just to give it really nice movement and flow. Now, in order to make the body of the bow, what you do is you take a thicker piece and you fold in the edges. Then you're going to fold over either side into the center. You do need to play around with this so it does look more like a fabric bow. Then you're going to take another piece and you're going to put it around that center piece so that you can't see any of those adjoining ends. Depending on the texture of your fondant, you can pinch things together and it will stick, but if it's just a little bit dry, don't be afraid to add a little bit of water. I really love when things are sticking out of the cake, so to give this just a little bit more height, I'm going to add one more rainbow at the back of the bow. Sorry that I didn't get that all into view, I was running low on battery. There are some cakes where just the front is fully decorated, but I really wanted to decorate this whole cake so everything looked beautiful from every angle. Adding on those gold pearls wherever you see fit really brightens up the cake as a whole. Now let's get into the pricing of this. Obviously, this cake has a lot of details. We always start with a $200 cake base anytime we have to tier anything, especially if it's covered in fondant. Add on all of those other details and you come to the grand total of $300. Now this cake from start to finish with all of the baking and making of things probably took around 5 hours. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading daily, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys.